Good afternoon, everyone, from us in London. This is the fourth session of Construction Blockchain Consortium, and our session will be around business opportunities and challenges around blockchain, of course. So we have 4 presentations from you, and then at the end of the session, we will have a panel discussion. And now we have already our first guest speaker lined up. So we will hear from Daniel Hall from ETH Zurich, and he will talk to us about integrated project delivery and blockchain. Daniel, the floor is yours.
Yeah, so thanks for having me. I'm excited to start talking about and start thinking about what we've been working on. This is work that's done by myself and also with Jens Hunjewitz, who's also here in the audience, about the governance of integrated project delivery on the crypto commons. And that's a lot, and we're going to get into it. It's not going to be a technical presentation, but we're going to give some of our conceptual overview of what that means. And first, let me start with this quote, which we tend to use quite a lot at our group, is that blockchain is a facilitator of new types of economic organization and governance, and therefore an institutional innovation with the potential to disrupt and substitute existing economic coordination. And so with this quote, it's talking about new types of economic organization and governance. And this leads us to the question of what is today's existing economic coordination and governance for construction project delivery. And so if you give me just a few minutes, I'll go into some of the historical views of what construction is and what we're trying to govern. So first, the first theoretical starting point is that construction projects equal complexity. Here you have a picture of a project site with many different forms of complex systems between the labor, the materials, the tasks to be done, the information flows, the weather. And then we have a second view of the construction industry is characterized by extreme fragmentation. You have a sense of a broken agency or misplaced agency between the design phases, the construction phase, and the operations phase, where people might be incentivized to make choices for their own benefits, but pass on costs later in the project. We have horizontal fragmentation that occurs through our trade-by-trade bidding. And then we have a longitudinal fragmentation across projects. So how do we manage these things in the past? Well, traditionally, construction management was one of command and control. And here's a picture from a movie in the United States with a famous General Patton, who was all about the command and control structure. And here you have someone at the top, and they are in charge, and you have, in a sense, this waterfall of requirements and commitments, and command passes up to the top. And this was the traditional view of project management and how we would manage projects. We would really try to use a very tight control on projects. But what we've seen in the last 2 decades is that new project delivery models embrace more decentralized or agile organizational and governance structures. So for example, integrated project delivery, which I've done a lot of work on. And what integrated project delivery does is it creates this risk and reward boundary using a pooled or alliance type contract, and then unites a group of stakeholders. Maybe it's the tier 1 general contractor, the client, and the architect, or it could be as many as in the United States, there's as many as 17 firms or more that are united in one group. And then there are some others that are outside of this consortium. And in doing so, they create what's known as a project-based company. And the theory behind this is that in complex systems, decentralization is better than hierarchy to manage that complexity. And as a result, we've also seen the rise of these more agile leadership teams or teams of teams. And I like the quote here where the person in the middle is saying, I'm the CEO, which stands for Chief Enabling Officer. So we've created now this management system, agile management, for empowering people. And this is what I would say is the current state of the art in construction project delivery. And this is what many new and novel project delivery models are trying to accomplish. And if we think about this in terms of blockchain, we would say, or just in terms of a network structure, we would say on the far left with a centralized solution, you have a command and control approach where you have a central node. If you look at what integrated project delivery and other new models are doing, they're approaching something that looks more like the middle, which is a decentralized system. But the question that I want to pose for us today is, what is the future of project delivery if some of the things we're talking about at this conference come to be, and we have a distributed network, and we try to, as we see on the right, and we try to deliver projects in that way, what will the project delivery models look like? And that's been really what we've been focusing our recent research on. So how should we design the project delivery model of the future in a Web 3.0 future? Now, if you just excuse a very brief foray into another theoretical view, which is one of common pool resources and the tragedy of the commons. So I work in Switzerland. I can't help but show a nice picture of the Swiss Alps here and a cow. So many of you may have heard of the tragedy of the commons and the idea of a common pool resource. And this is the idea that in the Swiss Alps, we have pasture that's open to everyone, and farmers can receive the benefit of their own animals, but the costs of deterioration of overgrazing or overeating are delayed costs. So herders will be incentivized to add more animals, and eventually the resource system will spiral downward. And what we've done in our past work is think about this integrated project delivery, which creates this pool you saw earlier as a common pool resource scenario. And you see here, this is actually in the language of those that design these integrated project delivery systems. They use the term pool quite often, whether it's contingency pool or profit pool or incentive pool. And then there was a study by the University of Minnesota on the right, which shows these different pool organizations of who is inside the pool and who is slightly outside and how they draw the boundaries there. And so as we think about this, we think about IPD being a common pool resource scenario where the budget and schedule is open to all, and the firm receives direct benefit for their activities because everyone has the rights to kind of to say we need to build this. And then there's also these delayed costs, and then rationally acting individuals or firms could take on more resources. And so what can happen, and what the risks that you would face in IPD or other types of collective projects, is you could have a downward spiral of project resources. And I call this the tragedy of the project. And this is what, if we're going to design a blockchain governance system for the future of projects, this is what we need to think about, making sure we don't have the tragedy of the project occur. Now, it's not all bad news, because it actually is found that common pool resource scenarios can be governed. Elinor Ostrom won the Nobel Prize for showing how local communities would govern projects, and they would use these 8 design principles. And I won't get into too much detail now, but I'll give a couple examples later. But these are principles of collective action in the face of a common pool resource scenario. And furthermore, bringing this back to blockchain, we have seen also that much emerging blockchain research is also looking at how blockchain can act as a decentralized management of commons. I think everyone here kind of understands the peer-to-peer nature and the distributed nature of a blockchain system. And so these blockchain affordances for decentralized collaboration could scale, in theory, a global commons. And several papers have looked at this, as you see cited on the right side. And so this is kind of all of the theoretical background I wanted to bring together to bring to the question, what might collective project delivery on the crypto commons look like? Where could this go for us in the future? And I just want to give one very quick practical example for some of our work, where we looked at monitoring resources through the use of, and this is one of the principles of a common pool resource governance scenario, is you want to monitor the resources and have appropriate ways to make sure we're not overdrawing or overpulling resources. So many of you may have seen this work before. We did it in 2019, where we created a complete, correct, and structured approach for high quality data sets, high quality BIM data sets. And we use blockchain to automate the collection process to ensure a trusted record, and leverage, most importantly, these crypto economic incentives to assure a high quality of data. And this is really an exercise in how do we monitor and make sure that the data that's provided in a BIM setting is correct. So we conducted meetings over a course of 1 year and thought about how to use blockchain for a simple house prototype, and then used an Ethereum smart contract prototype. I'm not going to talk too much about this work because it's available elsewhere and also on our YouTube channel. But essentially what we did is we set up the smart contract prototype with state variables controlling the process. And some of the key takeaways here was that we had a formalized and strict process for data quality that helps with completeness and structure. But really how it's connected to the Commons is are now currently thinking about the crypto economic incentive system to make sure you have a data supplier and a data verifier and that you can check the quality of the BIM data. And in doing so, we think that this is one way that you can monitor the resources of a collaborative project delivery on the crypto Commons. And you can think about also other ways that we could encode the Ostrom principles in smart contracts. This could be either with coordination rules. This could be rules like collective choice mechanisms. We see several examples from, for example, Aragon about how to deal with collective choice or how to deal with judicial issues that might rise and have these kind of micro courts that can solve disputes. And it also, we can encode the transparency and enforceability of these rules. And these, I think, is our task if we would want to go in this way. In addition, then we also have the ability to integrate with IoT because machines can hold addresses. And overall, we develop economic incentives to protect the commons, or in this case, it might be the project escrow, which would be managed in such a way to increase the value for the entire project. And this is forthcoming work from Jens, who I mentioned before, who is, sorry about that, his vision for blockchain for collective project governance. So this includes the feedback interaction between the trusted digital processes and the affordances of blockchain with the development and design of incentive mechanisms, whether that's through tokens or through logic. And finally, to summarize, and I know I'm a bit over because of my technical problems, so sorry for that. We think that blockchain for collective project governance is quite powerful because we think that distribution and decentralized systems are better suited collaboration mechanisms for complex systems like construction. And also it can enable better integration and interaction between the cyber-physical systems. And this is why we feel this is an important topic. So I'll summarize with these last 3 slides, which really, I know there was a lot of information presented, but I think it's important to kind of quickly summarize. If we look at some of the characteristics of the construction industry, we have this project-based industry with a lot of displaced or misplaced agency between the different companies and trades, and we're characterized by complex systems. At the same time, we can look at theories of management and economic coordination for collective action and common pool resources. So we can look at the work of Elinor Ostrom as one guiding principle. And furthermore, we have the characteristics of decentralized systems, Web 3.0 and Industry 4.0, which we believe blockchain is a key enabler, not the only, but a key enabler. And then within that, we see that there's a lot of work ongoing around blockchain governance to scale the crypto commons. That's not our work, but we see there's a lot of connections between this common pool resource and blockchain. We have developed our theoretical and conceptual guidance for how IPD and other collaborative project delivery models can be governed as a common pool resource scenario. And then we see that there's a need for working on digital twins and performance-based smart contracts, which can be the connecting point of the cyber-physical system of systems. And you'll hear more about our work on that from Jens, and Hong Yang from our chair will present tomorrow on some of these 2 ongoing projects. Altogether, we think that this provides us with a model for the governance of collective project delivery on the crypto commons. It's a theoretical model, and there's a lot of work that could be done. We think this is one helpful way of starting the conversation. So with that, thank you very much. A special note that this is a collaborative work in our chair, and especially Jens has been a key contributor, but he presents tomorrow, so I'm presenting it this today from our side. And yeah, we look forward to the forum and the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Now I can see that we have a question from our audience, from Alistair, who is asking you, do you believe that the characteristics of completeness, correctness, and structure are also possible with non-blockchain based technologies? And if so, what would be the unique value of blockchain? So we will be answering that now.
Yes, thanks, Alistair, for the question. What I would say is that what we found is that just a formalized process helped with completeness and structure. So there was no real value of blockchain. I wasn't able to say this, that we didn't find a lot of value on blockchain just from it was more value to having a formal and strict process. But where we did see a lot of value was in the correctness. because what we've soon realized and what we're working on now is that it's one thing to say, okay, provide your LOD, or whatever LOD was, LOD 400 model, and then it all gets dumped, and at the very end somebody checks it. It's a very different thing if these are data drops that then go and automatically have an auditor who also receives a token or reward for checking if the data is correct. And then they could also flag this and say, this is incorrect data. And maybe then you would devise a system that would go to a third party that would adjudicate and say, for example, oh yes, in fact, it was correct in the first place. And then the checker would not receive a reward token, but the original provider of the data. So it really gets into crypto economic incentive design. But we think that blockchain is powerful for the correctness, but completeness and structure, we did not find a lot of value.